Welcome to Shoocast, Shoo's very own podcast. This series of Shoocast will explore everything from trends in the digital world to advise on how we can play to your strengths and overcome personal and work challenges. We'll be featuring some amazing industry guests who will also be sharing their experiences within their field. Alongside me, I'm Rachel, the Chief Operations Officer at Shoo, and there will be Chris, our Chief Vision Officer, and also our guest hosts from the Shoo Academy, and these include Annie, Katie and Sabrina. We hope you enjoy our series this autumn. Thank you.
Hi guys, welcome back to Shoocast. Today we are joined by Mollie, our very own Mollie and Rachel from Shoo. And when this podcast goes out, it actually will be National Dyslexia Awareness Day. So we thought this is the perfect opportunity to talk about their experiences with dyslexia in the workplace, in school, and in general life. So to start off, for those who aren't really familiar with dyslexia and what it entails, do you want to tell us how it affects you in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, do you want to go first? You go first. So I guess for me it's more spelling. So if people aren't aware, dyslexia can affect everything from reading to spelling to writing, and mine's more spelling. So when you look at my handwriting or my typing, I put capitals everywhere, not so much in the middle of sentences, but at the start of a word I will capitalize it without thinking. And I also spell phonetically, so I spell how the word sounds. So until I couldn't spell the word because till I was about 15, because doesn't sound like you would write it. There's lots of E's and A's in there. Words like police, I have to sound out, so it's police, not police. It doesn't have E's and A's everywhere in it. And other words like that, so could, should and would, I could not spell till I was about 13 because they're all spelt very differently, like the O's and the U's, and I just couldn't get my head around that. So it's mainly spelling for me. I can read a book fine. If someone gave me a phone number, I could read it off a piece of paper. And if, on the other hand, if someone's reading out giving me their phone number, I'd have to go break it down or say it a lot slower because I just can't keep up when people are spelling things out. Similarly, if someone was like, "Oh, can you just jot this down for me?" I would, say it slowly because I can't remember what you're saying. But yeah, that's mainly me. Mine's more spelling and writing on command, I guess.
Yeah, so for me, I'm a late diagnosis. I've been diagnosed as an adult. I've always known that I've had something not quite right because all through school, it wasn't really something that's picked up on back in the sort of the early 90s when I was at sort of secondary school. So thankfully to the University of Bradford and me starting my MBA, so this is two degrees later that I've actually been officially diagnosed. So it's been an interesting journey because I put coping mechanisms in there to sort of help me with my writing, and it's actually the speed of my working memory. So a little bit like Mollie, I can't remember stuff. My short-term memory is not great, so when I'm writing stuff, I'll probably miss out sentences and words. So mine's very much about speed of writing, and then sometimes because I'm trying to remember stuff, I can't then sort of grammarize stuff, so the grammar just kind of goes out the window because I'm trying to keep up with the speed, and my hand just cannot, my brain cannot function to my hand. But reading and obviously reading out aloud is not really a problem, but I also need a little bit more time to digest information. So if someone put me on the spot and they ask me a question, I can't process that information fast enough to come out with something back. So I suppose all through my career, I hate being put on the spot. I need that time to go away, think about it, and then come back with an answer. And now I understand why I do all the things that I do, and there's a lot of coping mechanisms that I've put in terms of writing and getting support from people that can write really, really well. So I've been quite lucky that I have recognised something wasn't quite right, and then it didn't really help sort of at school because obviously exams, everyone's done everything at school is graded by examinations, and when you're in an exam you can't remember everything because short-term memory is not great. It makes sitting there a very anxious time, especially when you haven't been officially diagnosed but you know something's not right.
It's interesting how different people struggle with it differently, but then there is similarities that go through it all and everything.
Yeah, no, definitely, I agree. There's definitely some similarities, but also very, very different, which is great because Molly and I can help each other on certain things. She's quite good at reading through stuff and spotting things that are missing, and I'm good at spelling. So we have got our strengths and weaknesses, haven't we, Molly?
Yeah.
So after that, how has this dyslexia affected your work life, like with searching for jobs or a growth within a role? Have you ever felt like it's held you back at any point, or?
I guess so. For everyone who's listening, this is my first kind of proper job. I guess this is what I see myself doing long term. Previous to Shoo, I worked in retail at a garden centre and then on a beauty counter. So neither of the jobs there in retail I was writing or I was reading. On the beauty counter, the only thing that I found hard was when we were pushing for people to sign up with like the rewards app, and they had to give their phone number and their email. Customers were like, "Oh yeah, I'll do it," and they'd spit it out really fast. They'd be like, "Oh," and I'd be like, "Oh, can you just tell me that again and again and again?" And I guess when my manager saw that, she was not the best manager, but she was like, they've told you it 3 times, you need to treat customers better. And I was like, well, I'm not trying to do anything wrong. Like I'm not trying to, it's just because I can't remember someone's email. And I guess people's personal emails are a lot of initials and a lot of letters and numbers mixed together. So that for me is like hell on earth, trying to remember a password or a code. So I guess that's the only thing that I found hard. I've never had trouble finding a job. I've been very lucky at Shoo that Rachel has dyslexia as well, so she understands. She's never going to give me an essay to write. She's not going to say, "Oh, we want you to write a massive white paper on data analytics in social media and I want 5,000 words by Monday morning." She's not going to do that. But I guess you've had it a bit different.
Yeah, I suppose so. I think for me, I've always chosen my career and what degrees I've done at uni based on what I've had to sit exams. So I've always picked degrees, and even my master's degree prior to my MBA have always been about coursework, because I've got that time to actually research, think, edit and proofread and have everything checked out, which is great. It has put me off, I suppose, applying for certain jobs that require written communication skills, and a bit like Molly as well. I've always struggled to remember stuff like email addresses and phone numbers, so I've always kind of either made people email me their contact details, or I've actually got, if they're face to face, a bit like Molly's situation, get them to write it instead of me having to do it. So I put coping mechanisms in place in terms of like sort of emails and communication, sort of working with clients, kind of developed way of bullet pointing up my kind of what I needed from people. And I used to always get people to read my emails before I sent them out as well, because I was a bit like, oh, I've missed words out, or I've missed something out, it doesn't make sense, or I've skipped a paragraph. So I'm still very much like that now. I've got a great team around me that sort of, we all read each other's work, which is fab, just to make sure it sounds okay, or if the sentence structure isn't quite right, especially for me. So my spelling's fine, but I'm fortunate from when I started my career, technology's massively helped. Things like Grammarly and stuff like that, being able to actually use a computer instead of using your hand to write stuff. They're all kind of, technology's just completely changed the way that we've got these tools that can help us now, and we are really lucky in that respect. I feel really grateful for it all. If I'd gone to uni in the 80s and had to handwrite everything, I don't think I would have gone to university. I probably would have taken a different career route, because I wouldn't have been able to cope with all the writing.
So saying that, do you think that dyslexia has affected like your opportunities for you? Do you think you've held yourself back from potential opportunities? I know you said you've held yourself back from applying to certain jobs because of it has stuff to do with written communication. So do you think it has ever held you back from opportunities?
Yeah, I suppose the roles that I've picked have been quite practical, or a bit like Molly, they're quite client focused to avoid any writing. So I've not gone for pure marketing roles, because I suppose a lot of the time, sort of when I came out of uni the first time, there wasn't things like social media or digital marketing. And when sort of the early stages of the internet were kind of coming about. People didn't really use this type of marketing online, because that wasn't the thing. And it was very much still print marketing, traditional forms of marketing. And so yeah, they required a lot of writing back in the day, and yeah, I completely avoided all of that. So took a career in events management, because I'm good with people, I'm good at articulating and communicating sort of verbally. So I took a role in that. I'm very good at planning and very organized, because I've had to organize myself, because when you're dyslexic you can be a bit disorganized in your own head, because you're trying to remember stuff, and that the only way is to kind of work in lots and lots of lists. And that hence events management is about lots of lists and very, very specific detail and timing, and you come a bit, I suppose, a bit neurotic about stuff, because you need to be on time for everything, and you become a bit obsessed with your time management. So I think I remember being at school very kind of like all over the place, and you need to work in a timetable for my type of dyslexia anyway. So I can remember what I'm doing. A bit of routine always helps as well, otherwise it makes you, if I don't have that routine, it makes me very anxious. I can't work to last minute guidelines. I need that time. Like I could work on a 6-month project and I'll be fine. Give me something last minute to do with a knee-jerk reaction, I'd just panic. So yeah, it has definitely made me think about what job roles I should apply for and stuff over the sort of my 20 years of my career.
Molly, do you have any experience with it holding you back from opportunities, or not really?
I think I've been very lucky because it's not held me back from anything. I think I've not done a lot of things because of being anxious, but that's kind of something that's spun off being dyslexic, about thinking, oh, you know, like Rachel said about the timekeeping thing, like I buffer everything with an hour either end. So if I know I'm gonna, so I need to be at the train station to go to Leeds at 8 a.m. on a morning, well, I better get up at 7. You know, I could probably get up at 7:30, but I better buffer myself, because I know that the train might be early or it might be delayed. You know, I might have to change my plan of action. It's that thing of buffering everything. So I guess something that's kind of held me back, because if I can't buffer everything by an hour either end, I'm not going to do it. So yeah, I think I've been very lucky, because I guess it's more, I think accepted is the wrong word. I think it's more commonly known as a learning difficulty now, that people they wouldn't hold you back for it. So yeah, other than that, I don't think I've ever kind of stopped myself from doing something.
Good. Yeah, because I know with school, for me personally, I had like borderline dyslexia. I had it really bad when I was in primary school, and they did a lot of work with me to get me to a place that I was okay. So by the time it got to my exams at school, I applied for extra time, just because it takes me a while to process questions and things like that. So I just wanted time so I could plan and everything. And I got told I wasn't dyslexic enough, so that I had it, but I was told it wasn't good and it wasn't strong enough for me to get extra time. And I was a bit like, I didn't really understand that other people could, but because I was deemed not enough, I wasn't given the same resources. I don't know if you have an opinion on that, but I just never thought that was right.
Yeah, when I was at secondary school, I failed my English GCSE. So when I was 16, sitting my GCSEs, I failed. So when I went to college, they gave me the opportunity to resit it as part of the college course I was redoing. And when I started college, they sat everyone down in a room and said, all right, you're all going to do this test to see if you're dyslexic, because if you are, we can give you support. And I didn't pass that test. So in the college's eyes, I didn't have dyslexia. But the test, from what I remember, was very basic, and it didn't really test your spelling. It was about like word association. So kind of it would show you a red square, and it'd say, what colour is this square? What shape is this red thing? And it was kind of the word association. I'm like, but that's not me. You know, I need someone to see that I can't spell. So when I resat my English GCSE for the first time, I failed. And when I was resitting it in my second year of college, there was a lot of pressure on me, because they said to me, well, if you don't have your English GCSE, you're not going to get into uni. You can't do a degree. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to stay at that college and do my degree through the Open Uni. And my tutors not so much, but everyone else in the college, the student support team were coming down hard on me that, you know, oh, if you don't pass this, we can't offer you anything, like you're just going to have to go and get a job. And that was the first time I kind of felt pressure that, oh God, you know, I can't do this and I'm going to have to somehow. And I was in a class with other students who hadn't passed, who were my age, mature students who were coming back into learning, who were having to reset, and some students who had other learning difficulties that were put in that class as kind of more of a social thing. So I really struggled to concentrate because there was so much going on in the room. And one day the tutor who was teaching us all said to me in front of the whole class, well, Molly, your coursework's that rubbish that you might as well not do the exam. You might as well not sit the exam because your coursework wouldn't even pass. And so I went home and I told my mum, and she had to call the college and say, you know, this is unacceptable. You know, you cannot say that to one student alone, never mind in front of 30 people. And coincidentally, the following day, I was in that English class, and there was a knock on the door, and there was another lady who came and took me out the room, and she said, oh, we've managed to find you a computer. We've managed to find you some extra time that you can have. You can do it in a different room. And I passed my English GCSE that time. And I was just like, if that's what it takes, if it takes a teacher who had been there for some years to be so rude to me, and for a parent to complain for me to get my extra time and to get the computer, you know, what about the 29 other students in that class? What about the students who failed? You know, what about them? You know, you can't just expect, because a parent complained, to get you the resources that you need. It should be there. It should be available.
Well, especially now that it's said, like, no two people's dyslexia is the same. Everyone has different dyslexia and everyone has different ways of combating it. Like, some people like to write in different colours because it helps them pick different things out. So no two people's dyslexia are the same. So it doesn't really make sense that people are telling you you're not dyslexic enough or you can't have something when no dyslexia is the same. So I think that's a problem with it at the moment, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think the universities are recognising a lot. I think we're quite fortunate because I'm at the University of Bradford at the moment, that there is a high percentage of people in the Bradford district that are dyslexic, so they do test for it. I don't know about the other universities whether they do that, but I went through a very kind of rigorous test just when I was online, and paid for it, which is amazing. And then this and when I had the kind of the assessment with a psychologist as well, and their sort of learning coordinator, if I needed extra time and stuff. I suppose because of the years of actually sort of putting coping mechanisms, I'm so organized now. I know that I need to kind of start my essays earlier and plan earlier, so I didn't ask for the extra time because I knew the importance of deadlines. But I think had it been kind of 20 years ago when I was doing my undergraduate degree, I think it would have been a very different scenario. But like Molly, I failed my English language exam, and I failed it, and third time lucky I passed. And it was just through sort of sheer hard work and trying to get that grade C. I knew I wanted to go to uni, but then my A levels didn't reflect the grades that I wanted to, but Leeds Beckett University gave me a chance because I'd applied for quite a practical course. And if the uni hadn't been like that, I probably wouldn't have had the confidence to kind of carry on in education. So because of being at school, it probably sort of made me quite depressed because everyone else was going off to big academic universities and degrees, but I wasn't getting any of that.
Yeah, so we've picked up on obviously you got diagnosed at very different ages. Do you want to tell us a bit about how you were diagnosed, how you got there, what sort of, when you realised kind of that your brain was working differently to others?
Yeah, I guess mine's kind of, we're either end of the scale, I guess. So I was at primary school, and my mum worked at the same primary school I was going to, and she said that she remembers me doing homework with me at home, and she would tell me how to spell a word, and 2 minutes later I was writing it wrong again. I was spelling it wrong, And she got to the point where she was getting frustrated that she knew it wasn't me. She knew it wasn't me being funny with her, like I wasn't doing it to try and get out of doing my homework. So when I was in year 4, year 5, so I was like 9, 10, I went into the assistant head teacher's office and I was sat at a computer, and it's kind of like a DVD was put in and I had to do this kind of a test, I guess you could call it. And there was various shapes, pictures, sounds, and I had to, it's like a word association type thing. So it showed, like I said earlier, like a red square, and it said, what shape is this? What colour is this shape? You know, is this shape spinning to the left or to the right? And then it would show a picture of a cat and a dog, and it'd say meow, and it'd be like, which sound is that animal coming from? And after doing that, I got my diagnosis. So when I was in year 5 and 6, I did the Stairway to Spelling, I think it's called, the Stepway to Spelling, the Stairway to Spelling, which is a big blue book that I sat with a teaching assistant every Friday lunchtime. And it kind of, that was more about writing and spelling. So it was like doing a constant spelling test. So the teacher would read out a passage, and I would have to write it out, and then we'd go through and look at how I'd spelled things wrong. I look back at that now and think, how did I ever not realise how that word was spelled? But I guess it shows you how far I've come from spelling fur, S-I-U-R. You know, who would put an I in the word fur? Me. So then I went to secondary school, and the kind of diagnosis was passed over to the secondary school that, you know, this is Mollie, she's got dyslexia. And one tutor group a week, I think it was a Friday if I remember rightly, I was in a class with other students who had other learning difficulties. So some of them had dyslexia, some of them had dyspraxia, you know, it's kind of a mixed group. That was more of a homework help group. So if I had work that I was doing in the class, or if I had some homework that I just didn't get or I just couldn't do, there were teachers in that room at that tutor group time that would help me with that. And there was also, I vaguely remember there being kind of resources and kind of extra work for us to do in that class to help us with spelling. But that only kind of lasted year 7 and year 8, and then that kind of phased away. And I didn't really get any support over my GCSE period. But like Rachel said about picking more practical subjects, I obviously had to sit my English, maths and science and religious education, because my school, those were kind of like, you had to do those. But my chosen subjects were media, double ICT, IT and arts, and food tech. So you can kind of see that I did pick the more creative ones. I failed my science exam. I got a U in religious education because that was essay writing. And I just remember writing the same line over and over again because I just couldn't understand it because it was so in depth. And then obviously I went to college. I've told you that, you know, they didn't believe I was dyslexic. And then I suppose I did pass, so I got into my degree, which was makeup artistry, very different to what I'm doing now. But again, that was a very practical course. But I remember my tutor always saying, you know, you've got this wealth of knowledge, Mollie. You go to all these museums, you do all this research, but you just, there's something stopping you putting that in your sketchbooks and in your essays. You're just not putting, you know all this stuff, and you can sit here and tell me it all, but you just can't get it into your work. And looking back now, that probably is dyslexia, because I just I could verbalize it, but I just couldn't get it down in writing. So yeah, I guess that's my diagnosis story up to now.
Yeah, mine's a very sort of different story, because obviously I've only literally been diagnosed officially back in June. So I've kind of lived with it. I've known there was something not quite right, because I've avoided anything that involved examinations and stuff, anything that involves trying to remember things like piano exams, like even with my horse riding, I wouldn't have gone to and jumped a course of jumps because I've probably gone the wrong way around, knowing me, or missed something out because I wouldn't have been able to remember the course. So there's lots of things like that. In terms of being at sort of primary and secondary school, it wasn't really a done thing sort of back then, sort of late 80s, early 90s. So people, I think it'd have to be quite a severe diagnosis of dyslexia, and mine wasn't as probably because of the spelling and the writing and the reading that I was fine with, but they just couldn't understand what was going on. So that naturally just they just assumed I was stupid, and put me into lower sets at school, or just put me onto a lower GCSE paper. So instead of doing the advanced paper, they would put me onto an intermediate, which happened in my English exams. I was fine doing maths. For some reason, I was good at algebra, so it must have been pattern recognition. I must have been able to sort of remember patterns. So that's, and there was a lot of algebra in our GCSE paper that particular year. I don't know why. And core subjects such as RE, like Molly, a lot of it was project work as well. So it was just, our year was probably the first year of doing SATs. So it was still all very much a learning education system back then. So in terms of exams and stuff, there wasn't as many exams for everyone to take, even though the school tested for and lower ones. And obviously a lot of the kids might have had various other things going on, like ADHD or autism, but we were just branded as the stupid kids in the middle set or the lower bottom sets, because a lot of the kids were quite naughty as well, a lot of the boys, because they couldn't keep their attention and things like that. And obviously now we know there's a lot more things going on in people's lives. That awareness is more there now, which is quite lucky, because obviously people in your generation now are getting diagnosed earlier on at primary school, which I think is a key for anyone's learning really, is at primary school, because that's when your brain's still developing. But yeah, like over GCSE period, I should have had higher grades and A levels, but again, when I was doing my A levels, I had no support for anything. I was just left on my own and literally dropping subjects, and dropped down to like 2 A levels, just because they were like, oh, you can't do this. And I was like, I'm determined to get through it. I'll do something. I really want to go to uni. Didn't get the grades that I wanted to get because I didn't have any support, but thankfully Leeds Beckett had an interview, and the course that I was doing was quite practical. And I was already working in that particular industry sector part-time, so they knew I would dedicate my time, and it was all coursework. There was no exams, so I was very fortunate. They gave me they opened that door for me, but it was all down to a particular friend who believed in me, and she kind of said, you need to go for an interview. So I was on the phone to them asking, please let me in, knocking on the door saying, I can do this, I just can't do exams. If it wasn't for her, I suppose I wouldn't have. I was sat there like open that day when you get your A levels, and you just open that letter and you know you've not done very well, and it's just that dread. And I didn't go to school to pick my results up because I didn't want to see any of my friends, because they had all done really, really well. So yeah, there's like a really different diagnosis. And then through uni, I suppose I wasn't very confident, just very anxious about sort of putting myself forward. I hated doing presentations because I thought I couldn't remember everything. And then when I did my master's, it was a very different scenario, because the way of teaching at Sheffield Hallam was really different, and there was a lot more, because the class was smaller, had a lot more attention from the lecturers and stuff. And it was a very different style of learning, and I was a bit braver and more confident, so I asked for help. And not necessarily, it wasn't from the uni, but the people that I was surrounded by, because they could see my weaknesses. But now, like going back to uni again, there's just so much more support out there, I suppose, because it's officially recognised as a disability as well. So the unis are a lot more proactive in terms of giving that support out there now, which I think is amazing. How in sort of 20 years, that whole scenario of the education system has adapted and understood people a lot more. And I think that's really important, because why should anything hinder people? And they shouldn't have to go through that stress of when applying for jobs. They shouldn't have to. No one should go through that mental anxiety. It's not fair.
No, it's not fair. But yeah, I think there is definitely a lot more awareness out there for it now, which is always positive. Coming back to dyslexia in the workplace, do you ever think it's affected you when it's come to communicate with clients? I know you said about obviously email addresses and everything, remembering it all. Do you think it has? Has there ever been anything notable that you've been struggled to communicate with clients before?
I guess for me, it's writing emails, getting Rachel and Chris and Fran to check off as the mat on the cat, because I'm thinking too far ahead in my head. So I guess for me, it's getting people to check my emails over. Sometimes my emails come across as very direct when I don't mean them to be, because I'm just trying to get the information in there. Rings the office and it's like a cold lead. I had one the other day where I picked up the phone and a lady wanted information. I'm like, can we get a meeting booked in? Because I need time to understand what your business does and what we can help with. I can't tell you that over the phone because I just can't take that on. And I had to go find her business on LinkedIn, because I was like, even though she read it out to me twice, I was like, I need to double check that it's right, because I don't want to send the email to a dud email and then her ring up on Monday morning going, you said you were going to send me an email and you haven't.
I've just got one final question, and it says, do you think it's increased awareness for this? The increased awareness of dyslexia has resulted in there being more support in the workplace, in schools and universities, to help people with dyslexia, as it now is considered a disability?
I definitely think there's more support in school and universities. I mean, I graduated in 2019 from my BA, and there was support there then, and so there's still, I hope there still will be today. But I definitely think from someone who was diagnosed when I was like 9, 10, there's definitely, I think you need more support at higher education level, because that's when you sit in exams and that's when your exams kind of matter. When you sit in your SATs at primary school, that only kind of matters for like the first sets you go into in year 7. I just don't think there's that support there in primary school as much as there is, but I suppose it matters more in secondary school and higher education, and in the workplace. You know, I've never had a job where I needed support where there wasn't support. I've been very lucky in that sense. You know, I know you'll have different.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, because I'm such a late diagnosis, I suppose I've never really worked in a large corporate organisation, and I don't know what support there is out there, or if there is any. But definitely the education system, I think it's recognised now that there is that support, and it might be because of people like me who may have been diagnosed in their 20s have kind of campaigned for it to kind of be put forward, and they're kind of key things, I suppose, that are kind of changing and paving the way to get that support, like from kind of the early noughties being at university to kind of going back again 20 years later. It's like a massive difference in terms of what support is out there, and universities are more approachable now than they ever have been. And I have no idea what it's like at school, but I can imagine from what Mollie's told me, there is more support there now. Teachers are more empathetic towards the cause. I think when people start speaking out about it like we are today, hopefully it will either get people who are kind of a similar age to me or older, perhaps go for a diagnosis now because they think, well, actually, I'm not stupid. It's just I can't write very well. And I can imagine like maybe generations before me, sort of who are like kind of 80 years old now, they might have gone through school just thinking they were stupid, and actually they weren't. They were just dyslexic or dyspraxic or whatever is out there now, ADHD, autism, all of those things are out there. And I just think perhaps, you know, they wouldn't, and they've always grown up thinking they were the stupid ones, and I think that's really wrong. But I think times have changed, and I hope that sort of the bigger corporate companies will probably kind of start recognizing that people can do stuff, but people don't have to be good at everything now. And that's pretty much how we operate at Shoo as a business. I know we're a smaller business, but we understand what everyone's got strengths and weaknesses, and sometimes it's just about working together as a team. You know what it's like, Annie, you're on the Shoo Academy, you've got your strengths. Mollie's got her strengths of her creativity. You're an amazing writer and your grammar's impeccable. You're a good proofreader. I'm just good at organising people and getting that organisation there. And I think it is working together as a team, and perhaps hopefully the bigger organisations will start kind of seeing that dyslexic people are more creative than most people, and we have got some really good ideas.
The whole thing of playing to your strengths, because I know it's the whole thing of like, oh well, you should want to improve on your weaknesses, but what's the point in focusing on your weaknesses when you could be doing so great as your strength, and your weakness could be someone else's strength? It doesn't really make sense to the team if you're doing something that you're not very good at, someone's better than you at. and you could be doing their job that you're better than. Like, it's just about playing to everyone's strength. Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you Molly and Rachel for telling us about your story with dyslexia, and I hope that if this National Dyslexia Awareness Day brings forward things like bigger corporations putting adaptations in place to support those who are struggling with dyslexia, dyspraxia and everything else.
Brilliant. Thank you, Annie. Thank you very much for hosting.
Soundstripe.